With more than 6,000 small and microcap companies listed, if you're looking for the next apple at the earliest stage, then Channel Check truly is the orchard. The listed companies support Channel Check, so it's free for you, the potential investor, to gain access to institutional quality research from FINRA licensed analysts, advanced market data, industry reports, news, and a growing catalog of videos and webcasts. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and register for Channel Check so you're always up to date on what's going on at the small and microcap data place. Welcome to the C-Suite series presented by Channel Check and Noble Capital Markets. Noble is an SEC-registered, FINRA-licensed broker-dealer and the source of the equity research available on Channel Check. Today's interview features Axcella Therapeutics, NASDAQ ticker symbol AXLA. Noble Senior Research Analyst Robert LeBoyer interviews Axcella Therapeutics President and CEO Bill Hinshaw. Visit channelcheck.com or click the link in the description for Noble's research on Axcella, as well as news and advanced market data. And now, here's Robert and Bill.
I'm Robert LeBoyer, Senior Biotechnology Analyst at Noble Capital Markets. With me today is Bill Hinshaw, CEO of Axcella Therapeutics. Axcella is developing a category of drugs known as endogenous metabolic modulators. Its two lead products are AXA 1655 in a phase 2 trial for overt hepatic encephalopathy, AXA 1125 in a phase 2b trial for Nash, nonalcoholic steatohepatitis, and a newly announced indication for long COVID. Bill, can you start by telling us what endogenous modulators are and a little bit about the pipeline?
Sure, absolutely, Robert. First, thank you for having me with you today, and to Noble Capital, along with, of course, your audience for their interest in Axcella Therapeutics. So let's start with EMMs and what they are, and then I'll tell you how Axcella Therapeutics is poised to pioneer with them. So endogenous metabolic modulators are a series of compositions that work with the body systems. You're familiar with hormones, GLP-1s, bile acids, and other agents. And what Axcella Health does specifically is focus on endogenous metabolic modulators anchored by amino acids and their derivatives. Now, how we got here is we are a flagship pioneering founded company, and your audience will likely know flagship due to they also founded Moderna. And Stephen Hogue is, who's the president of Moderna, is also on our board. Now, what's at the core of all of the flagship founded companies is a transformational idea. And if that idea works, it has the potential to work really well and at scale. And in the case of Axcella, what that is could we use these endogenous metabolic modulators to reset multiple pathways at the same time, specifically in the setting of complex diseases? And that's because there is this advance related to how do you work with the body system. And we've seen that with cell therapies, gene therapies, EMMs, and more, as well as how can we leverage systems biology and machine learning to make complex diseases attainable. And so most of the pharmaceutical industry is focused on single targets. You know, there's a pathway and a mechanism, and that has worked extremely well. And I've had the privilege to work on programs like Gleevec and Kymriah, where you can do powerful things in that setting. But for complex diseases, there's a gap. And so what we're looking at is how can you create multiple target agents at the same time? And it turns out that you can, and we indeed have. So you mentioned our two important liver programs in the context of 1665 and 1125. And due to the foundation of our science, as well as our innovative development model, we have very rapidly progressed into the phase 2 programs that you're speaking about. And due to the findings in our science and the evolution of what's occurred in the long COVID population, we're now poised to initiate a phase 2A with the University of Oxford that we are excited about the potential to make a difference for these patients as well. So we're setting up for a very milestone-rich timeframe and excited to continue our journey to lead with endogenous metabolic modulators.
Can you tell just a little bit of detail about the discovery platform and how the products are made, maybe a little bit about the proprietary nature and how they act?
Absolutely. So Axcella Therapeutics is founded on a design concept where we first understand the biologies and the pathways where we believe the EMMs can have a powerful impact. We then work through prioritizing which of these pathways should we focus on. And we do the first with systems biology and machine learning and network models that we put together. Then we get into a series of tools, including our proprietary primary human cell models. We have, of course, access to the omic data that's out there in the world, the literature that is on these databases, and PK/PD data where we prioritize which of the pathways we're going to go after. Now we get into an optimization and design phase where we're putting together between 6, 8, 10 different constituents designed to have an impact on specific pathways that have a relationship in the disease. We then translate that into demonstrating the impact on amino acid biology and other things directly in diseased human subjects. So this is the most relevant setting you can test a hypothesis on, right? Because you have the dysregulated biologies, you have the people who have the disease, and we're able, because of the GRAS status of our products, which means generally regarded as safe, to test in that setting and then move directly into, in this case, phase 2 trials. And it's because we've gathered significant data about the biological impact, about the safety and tolerability and the dosing of this, and we now proceed into these phase 2 trials well informed, and we believe de-risking our next stages of development. Not only is that first part extremely rapid and focused, we believe it's highly informed and sets us up for a higher chance of success as we try to tackle these important diseases.
Great. One of the things that struck me about the company when I started to look into it was that you have these multiple points of action. Most drugs are directed at a specific enzyme or receptor or a single point of action, and your products are directed at multiple steps, which shows itself in the results that have impact on symptoms in many tissues throughout the body. So with that, could you tell us a little bit about AXA 1665 and the clinical trials?
Absolutely. So AXA 1665 is being developed in overt hepatic encephalopathy. And encephalopathy is neurocognitive impairment driven in the cirrhotic situation where the liver is scarred and not functioning properly. And so what ends up happening is there's waste products that are built up. The patient is neurocognitively impaired, and this ranges from confusion and personality changes, which can be devastating for a family by itself, up to and including coma and death. Now, this is driven by a series of complex pathways, one of which is ammonia handling, another of which is amino acid imbalance, a third one of which is muscle metabolism, because basically these patients start to physically waste away because the muscle is trying to help this metabolic issue. And so AXA 1665 is specifically designed, Robert, to your question, to address the amino acid imbalance, to address the ammonia handling, and to address muscle metabolism, improving the neurocognitive impairment. And so we've conducted 2 consecutive positive studies in mild to moderate hepatic insufficient patients and demonstrated an impact across those biologies. And that led us to go to the agency and initiate the EMPOWER study, which is a phase 2 trial underway right now. The medical community is very excited about working with us on this because the current standards of care are focused only on the ammonia handling aspect. And in fact, they do it indirectly. They're preventing ammonia from the gut to proceed up into the brain to cause the neurocognitive impairment. And one of them is a large volume, bad tasting liquid called lactulose, which you have to dose multiple times a day to actually titrate to loose stools. So obviously for a patient who's in advanced liver crisis, this is a difficult situation to deal with. And the other one is an antibiotic, which kills bacteria in the gut. So 1665 is designed to impact multiple pathways, to your start of your question, do that simultaneously, and we believe have an impact that first hopefully can improve on the standard of care and eventually become the standard of care. The trial that we have right now underway, the Empower trial, looks at 2 arms. So AXA 1665 on top of standard of care versus the standard of care and placebo. It's a 150 patient trial. We've initiated a global study in this setting with over 70 sites, and we're actively recruiting right now. The primary endpoint is something called a change in PHES, which is one of the neurocognitive scores that we've already demonstrated an impact on in our previous trial. And we're gathering important information on OHE measures, such as the time to OHE, proportion of patients who experience hospitalization, as well as safety and tolerability and functional measures. And so we're excited to have this underway and look forward to giving an update on the enrollment next year.
If I could understand that in simple terms, it sounds like what this drug does is when you give it to patients who have liver dysfunction and are not filtering the product out of the bloodstream properly, you're restoring that balance to stop the liver from spilling these toxic substances into the bloodstream and having effects on multiple organs, such as the brain, and stopping the muscle from trying to compensate.
Yes.
So that the only other things out there, as you mentioned, are trying to reduce the ammonia in the bloodstream and take out this byproduct that the liver is unable to handle. You're correcting the problem and stopping the production of these toxic substances rather than just trying to soak up the damage that they do.
That's a very good way of putting it, Robert. In essence, when you think about the amino acids, they're imbalanced, right? Because and so what we do is restore that. We've shown that through something called the Fisher's ratio, where we can restore that within 2 weeks to normal levels, sustain and have a statistically significant difference on that. That's an outcome that is correlated to infection, hospitalization, morbidity, and mortality. So restoring that is an important indicator that we're working on that amino acid imbalance. Now, we're also, to your point, working on the muscle side of things, because we're actually creating proteogenics signaling through mTORC and providing the substrate. So now the patient's muscle hopefully can be maintained or improved, which is important because otherwise they're wasting and actually causing more neurocognitive impairment because ammonia is escaping through that process and triggering into the brain. And we have demonstrated that in the MHE, or a more advanced patient population, that we are reducing, in fact, the ammonia that's available for that process. So as you articulated, we're looking to restore the biological processes in a way and on a multi-targeted level that goes beyond the current standards of care mechanism.
Great.
The fact is, on top of that, it's oral, it's safe and well tolerated to date, and that combination of a profile goes throughout our programs. Multi-targeted, oral, safe and well tolerated today, because we're working with the body's pathways, we're resetting them and restoring them towards homeostasis.
Yeah, the fact that these are generally accepted as safe, the GRAS ingredients, makes it so that the safety should not be an issue with any of these clinical trials and with the patients. So that was one thing I found impressive. Just in the interest of time, just moving on to 1125, can you tell us a little bit about this and the Nash indication, and then of course long COVID?
Yes. Now let's start with Nash. Nash is an important and very large disease. More than 40 million Americans are estimated to have it, and 1 in 10 of our children. And it is a devastating impact on the healthcare system. And yet there are no approved therapies. It is a complex disease. You have metabolism, inflammation, and fibrosis, all as key drivers. And to date, most of the work has been done on single targets, again, back to what we discussed earlier. What you actually see in the life sciences industry is a lot of combination work, because it's well understood that we're going to have to put together combinations to have an impact on this disease. That's where we come in. We're inherently combination. We target PPAR alpha, AMPK, NF kappa beta, HIF1, TGF-beta, all at the same time. And each one of those is individual drug targets. And so in our 2 trials that we've conducted to date, we've already demonstrated impact on liver fat reduction, on areas like HOMO-IR, ALT, CT1, PRO-C3, all important measures of metabolism, inflammation, and fibrosis. We've also demonstrated that we're reaching thresholds that are important in terms of translation into histological or the liver itself improvement, which is the regulatory endpoint. And we see that in all patients in up to 35–40% in just 16 weeks of therapy. And we see it even higher in the difficult to treat type 2 diabetic population, which makes up about 40% or more of this disease state. So we're very excited about our opportunity in 1125 and NASH. We started the phase 2b global trial called IMPACT, which has gotten off to a great start. This is something, again, where the physicians see that profile and have told us this could be a foundational first-line therapy. And because of its profile, we have the opportunity to investigate it in pediatrics, which is an important population. Type 2 diabetics, hopefully we'll continue to see that differentiation, in which case that could be a game changer because that's not been seen very commonly through the development agents at stake today. And we, of course, look for the future in expanding in that population. So that trial will have an interim readout in the middle of next year on a meaningful group of 24 weeks of data. And that will be progressive data on our 12 and 16 weeks we've already demonstrated. So we're very excited about that program and how that's initiated. Now, I want to talk about the long COVID program. We're extremely excited about what we found there. Are there anything else you want to touch on NASH? Because that's an important disease, of course, for patients.
Well, one of the things that you touched on was the idea of how the drug works and the comparison with others. So that would the idea. What about the administration and how your drug would be taken compared with some of the others that have been in development?
Yeah, now it's a great point, because when you have a large chronic disease, as NASH is, you think about the risk benefit and you think about the convenience for the patient, right? And our multi-targeted mechanism and our well-tolerated safety profile to date give that an excellent balance on the risk benefit, which is why the physicians see it as a potential first-line therapy. When you add in the fact that this is an oral agent, and you have a range of dosing approaches, including injectables and oral agents in development in NASH. And again, this is a chronic disease, so the patients will probably be taking this product for a long time. So ours is a dry powder sachet. You simply pour it into 4 to 6 ounces of water, shake, drink. It has an excellent mouthfeel, palatability, and the taste is orange creamsicle. So the compliance has been very high to date and convenient to take. So we're very excited about what this can offer for this important disease and these patients who really do need innovation.
One of the other points that came across to me as I was looking at this is that these are patients with other conditions. So they're on other medications, other pills, maybe even injectables, so that the oral administration would fit very well with their other therapies.
Absolutely. You have several aspects there, Robert. Number one is that these patients have cardiovascular complications, and thus the physicians are thinking about what's an easy addition and a safe addition that probably doesn't cause challenges for both the tolerability, administration, to your point, and drug-drug interactions, where we have a very low chance of having an issue because we're actually metabolized by muscle and not the liver. So this again fits into the physician's equation of why when they look at our data, they get excited about the profile and what it could offer for them and their patients to improve their care.
Yeah, it seems to fit well with the current practice and what the patients are already doing.
Absolutely. And that's one reason we've had an excellent response to our trials to date as well.
Yeah, okay. So could you tell us a bit about long COVID and
Absolutely.
What it is, number of patients, and what 1125 would be doing for them?
Yeah, let's start with the need and the situation, then, as you said, touch on how 1125 has a potential important role here. So, of course, everybody is all too familiar with the pandemic and COVID itself, and more than 240 million patients who have been infected already. lots of innovation on vaccines, important innovation on the therapeutics for acute treatment. Almost no action or investment to date in long COVID. Now, what long COVID is a constellation of two major groups of symptoms that are affecting up to a quarter or maybe even more of these patients. So you're talking more than 50 million patients worldwide to date, more than 14 million in the United States, and the majority of these patients are suffering from fatigue and muscle weakness. And that's where 1125 comes in. And to put a human element on these numbers, Robert, these are often patients who are triathletes, even Olympic athletes, who are now in wheelchairs in some cases. This is a devastating disease and fatigue. It is not light. And so what we've seen in the UK, for instance, is up to half of these patients are either not working or they have a modified work approach. So not only is it a huge impact on the patient and their family, of course, it's a huge impact on the system. And so what we've been looking at as part of our science, looking at the different pathways that we affect, is our potential impact on mitochondrial function. Now, mitochondria, many of your audience will be familiar with, is of course the powerhouse of the cell. It generates the energy that allows us to function. And what occurs is a really negative impact on your body's ability to function that way. And we've been studying this in Nash and in other areas. So we have preclinical and clinical data that demonstrate our ability to restore mitochondrial function and what's called cellular energetics. Now, how do we do that, and how did we study that in essence, and why is that important in long COVID, to your question? So, because we've been looking at how this has been developing, and what we saw was our data matching up with the fact that mitochondrial dysfunction was becoming clearer and clearer as a key driver for this fatigue and muscle weakness. In fact, Dr. Rahman and Neubauer at the University of Oxford, who we're working with, what they were seeing as a center of excellence is patients' hearts and lungs in some cases were recovering, but their ability to function was not. And that was because of the mitochondrial dysfunction as the hypothesis. So in 1125, what we have shown is an ability to improve fatty acid oxidation, to improve cellular respiration, increase ATP generation, improve the inflammatory aspects, and turn that into improved immune and muscle function. Now, why is that relevant in this setting? So a nice way of thinking about this, and you used the term, a simple explanation earlier, is that your energy in your cell is like a rechargeable battery, okay? And the virus comes in, switches the fuel approach to glycolysis to help it replicate more of the virus. When it does that, it actually damages the mitochondrial's ability to function in the normal way, which is to use fatty acid oxidation. Okay, so now your battery cannot recharge, and thus you cannot draw upon energy. Your cell cannot breathe. Obviously, when we can't breathe, we can't run, we can't function at a high level. Your cells can't breathe and can't produce ATP at the level that they normally do. So now what we have demonstrated, again, in cellular, or preclinical and clinical abilities, is the chance to restore that energetic pathway and increase ATP. And so that's why ourselves and the University of Oxford are so excited to have an opportunity to make a difference for these patients who have so little options right now. And so we're embarking on a phase 2 trial, which will initiate later this year and report data out in the middle of next year is our current plan. This will be a study looking at a primary endpoint called phosphocreatine. Now, this is a measure of energy replacement, and it is correlated with muscle function and, in fact, the 6-minute walk, which is a key regulatory endpoint. We've seen this demonstrated in other key diseases like chronic kidney disease, Duchenne's, ALS, etc. Now, we're also gathering information on lactate levels, chronic fatigue scores, as well as 6-minute walk, and of course, functional and biological measures in addition to safety and tolerability. So this trial will be 40 patients comparing our product AXA versus placebo using that primary endpoint, a very validated precise, direct measure of mitochondrial function, and we'll be able to tell whether or not we're having an impact on that particular mechanism. If that's the case, then we have the potential to go forward into a registration trial as our aspiration and our hope, because of the high unmet medical need and the lack of development in this setting. You combine that with the fact that this is 1125, we already have a lot of safety information and demonstrated activity, and we can produce it and move forward rapidly. And this is a tremendous opportunity for us to try to contribute to such a devastating disease.
Wow, that's really interesting. You know, the idea that the virus actually takes over the cell metabolism and causes permanent damage and change is something one doesn't hear about very often. You hear about long COVID and this mysterious syndrome, but actually knowing how it happens and the possibility that 1125 can actually help these patients is really interesting.
Yeah, it's a foundational set of sciences, right? So we know how the mitochondria functions. We know that viruses hijack cells, okay, to produce more of them. And we know that in a case like this, if you can restore it, that you can return to this. So now putting those pieces together, because we see this in other areas like Epstein-Barr, other viral infections. So this is not unique to SARS-CoV, but it is distinct in the magnitude and the fact that we're in a pandemic. So we have this situation where we have a known infection situation. We see which patients are able to recover on their own, but a substantial portion are not able to. And then can we restore and help these patients and their cells recharge their batteries and repair it? And if that's the case, then that certainly offers an opportunity to improve in long COVID, that the majority of the patients suffer from this particular set of symptoms. And then hopefully we can go on to other mitochondrial driven diseases like myopathies and things of that nature to make a difference for those patients as well. That's our hope and aspiration.
Sure, mitochondrial dysfunction is a whole field of science in itself, and that's really in its infancy. So it's really great to hear. Could you just reiterate the milestones for the COVID trial as well as the Nash and the OHE trials?
Absolutely, and I'll do it chronologically so your audience has that kind of flow, right? So first we got the MHRA CTA clearance for the long COVID program that has just occurred. We are going to initiate the trial by the end of the year with the University of Oxford. We will then have a report out of that data by the middle of next year is our current planning. Obviously, we're working hard to continue our strong track record of delivery on that. We then will also have the interim analysis for 1125 in the Nash program. This is a 270 patient trial with 3 arms looking at biopsy endpoints in Nash patients. And we'll be using I'll say the typical and state-of-the-art measures for that interim analysis also in the middle of next year. Then we will have the enrollment completions for the various trials, and then we will have the top line data for the OHE and Nash programs in the second half of 23. Now we have other ideas, other programs. This is a platform, and you asked about that, Robert, that can rapidly generate candidates and ideas. Of course, we're being thoughtful about using our proceeds properly, achieving key milestones, and then expanding in an informed way. So we feel there's a tremendous opportunity to make a difference here, and we believe we're entering a very milestone-rich period for the company and for our investors.
Yes, lots of milestones, and the culmination of lots of preclinical work is now you're on the cusp of all of these data milestones and trials that will hopefully drive the company forward.
Absolutely.
And, okay, I know that the company's planning to release the quarterly results on November 10th. Can you just give a quick update as to how much cash you have on hand right now?
So through June of this year, we had roughly $78 million in cash and marketable securities. That takes us into the third quarter of 22 with our current planning cycle and past those key milestones in the near term that I mentioned to you. And again, we believe this is a potentially transformational period for the company and hopefully for these patients that we're seeking to serve.
Yes, well, I will certainly be looking forward to seeing these announcements and the results from these trials.
As we will
Okay.
be, of course.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much. This has been a really great discussion. Thanks
Thank you,
for
Robert.
joining us.
Appreciate it very much, everybody. Be well.
Thank you for joining us for this C-Suite interview presentation brought to you by Channel Check. Visit our YouTube channel for more interview content, as well as virtual roadshows and conference presentation replays. New content is added regularly, so subscribe below to stay up to date. Visit channelcheck.com or click the link in the description to access equity research, news, and advanced market data on this and the 6,000 other small and microcap companies listed.